Welcome to the Moved to Meditate podcast. I'm your host, Addie D. Hilster. If you're a yoga practitioner or teacher who knows that there's more to yoga than poses, but you're wondering where to find that, come join our quiet little party. Here you'll find resources to help you deepen your practice, as well as insightful conversations with yoga, movement, and meditation teachers from a range of traditions. On this podcast, we spotlight the more contemplative aspects of movement practice. So we talk about all things gentle yoga, meditation, yin, restorative, yoga therapy, mindfulness, and more. Listen in and connect to a community of like-minded practitioners. Okay, hello everyone. This is Addie. If you are new here, new to the podcast, welcome. If you are a returning listener, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate people who are listening and letting me know, and all of the beautiful support that we've been receiving for this podcast now that we've been going for over 20 episodes, which I can hardly believe. So today I'm going to be introducing our deeper dive theme for February of 2022. But don't worry if you are listening to this in some other time in the future. This is really a topic I think is always helpful and really good to contemplate. And that topic is equanimity. Equanimity means steadiness of the mind or of the heart mind, because it does involve a lot of, our emotions and our moods as well as our thought processes. So we think of that as the greater heart mind. And this sense of steadiness we call equanimity. So doesn't that sound like a good thing to do a deep dive on this month, or like really at any time? It's something that I have practiced a lot and thought about a lot over the years, and currently it is a pretty strong focus in my practice. So I do have a lot to say about it. And yesterday I was making the deeper dive worksheets for equanimity for this month, and I was like really realizing how many directions this could go in. So I will do my best to contain this episode and keep it from being 3 hours long or anything like that. So the way this deeper dive thing works is that I kick it off every month with a podcast talk about the topic, kind of like introduce the topic. And then during the first week of the month, I send out a worksheet that you can download if you want and use it in your personal practice. And this one for equanimity will have like definitions and phrases and images and symbols and reflection questions and different embodied practice ideas to play with. The idea being you don't have to do all of it, but you can be inspired by something and kind of have fun exploring making this topic your own. And so then in the third week of the month, I will send out a guided meditation on the topic to help you kind of keep staying engaged and practice with it in a more formal way. And all of these resources are free. All you need to do to receive them is to just be on my email list, because that's how I send them out. So you can go to movedtomeditate.yoga to sign up for the email list if you're not on it already, or look for that link in the podcast description and the show notes. So I will remind you about that again at the end of the episode, so you'll be intrigued, hopefully by then, by this topic of equanimity and want to practice with it some more. And it's kind of building on the topic that we had for January, which was patience and persistence. There's a lot of overlap with patience and equanimity, especially because even patience, persistence, and equanimity are all wise ways to relate to whatever's happening around us, depending on the context. And, what's happening around us, like the things that we want, the things that we don't want, change, things that we want to hurry up, things that we hope will never end, like that basic kind of human push-pull that we do with everything. We need equanimity for this reason. Patience and persistence, which is also called resolve, translated as resolve, and also equanimity, these are all part of a set of Buddhist teachings called the 10 paramis, which means perfections, but I think of them as like 10 good character qualities or excellent qualities to develop. Don't worry too much about the perfection word if that hangs you up. So equanimity is also one of those. And equanimity is taught in many different ways in the kind of mindfulness and Buddhist tradition. Another one of those lists, those teaching lists, is the 4 Brahma Viharas, or divine abodes. That means divine abodes. An abode, of course, is a home. So you could think of the divine abodes as like the kind of beneficial homes, the kind of house that you'd want your mind to like live in and hang out and rest in, right? Equanimity is one of those divine abodes, along with metta, or which is known as loving kindness, or also karuna, which is known as compassion, mudita, which is joy and gratitude. So those 4, equanimity, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and gratitude, that is the 4 Brahma Viharas. If you stick around, you'll hear more about those in the coming months. If you know the Yoga Sutras as well, those 4 qualities are also listed in that text. So they do cross these different traditions, these kind of interconnected traditions of Buddhism and yoga. And if we go back to equanimity specifically, it's called upeksha in Sanskrit. It's called upekkha in Pali. Pali is the language of the early Buddhist texts. Sanskrit is how you would see it rendered in like the yoga tradition and the Yoga Sutras. I tend to refer to it as upekkha when I use the original language because I've mostly learned about it myself and practiced it from the Buddhist insight meditation perspective. So that's a little bit of the context of what we're talking about here. And to get more into the specifics about equanimity, I said earlier, equanimity is the steadiness of the mind and heart. So it's how we stay centered despite turbulent circumstances or uncertainty or situations that we can't change. It's like the capacity of the mind to stay centered in that and to remember its highest intentions and not to get so swept up and lost in what's going on. I once heard a teacher describe it as the ability to walk evenly over uneven ground, which I really love. And I wish I could remember who I heard say that. It's been so long. I'd love to credit the teacher, but I can't because I just don't remember. But to walk evenly over uneven ground, I love that. So this kind of points to how we're cultivating equanimity for exactly those moments when things are not perfect, things are not simple, things are not easy, and how we can work with what we can't control. We'd like to control it, but we can't always even out the ground that we have to walk on. Like how exhausting to have to make the whole earth like flat and smooth and level. We really can't do that. But we can learn how to walk and navigate on that terrain with more smoothness. That's where we have the most agency. My personal working definition of equanimity that I've kind of come up with in my own words is that it's an empowering steadiness that allows us to be in relationship with our circumstances. So there are a few important points to break down there. An empowering steadiness that allows us to be in relationship with circumstances. So first of all, equanimity is not passive. So I call it an empowering steadiness for a reason. And I talked about this with patience as well, that it's not passive. And it doesn't mean you don't have feelings and reactions. It's more like you're able to handle your feelings and reactions and still stay somewhat grounded. Or to be really realistic, it's like you know how to bounce back and get regrounded when you recognize that you've probably been overactivated or shut down by a lot of reactivity to something. So equanimity is not numb, it's not passive, it's not apathetic. It is easy for us to go there when we're overwhelmed, though, because, you can just see it for a lot of us just watching the news or reading about the news or scrolling through social media. Like, we can quickly hear so much that's terrible or disturbing or unclear, how this is going to work out, that either we get really reactive and really wrought and affected by it, or we can kind of like go numb and sort of like disconnect and check out from it. Could go either way very easily. So that's not actually equanimity, that like kind of numbed feeling. Sometimes people confuse it for that, but equanimity does have this quality of spaciousness, around it. Like, we're not totally stuck and glued to the thoughts and the feelings about what's happening, but it's also not that we're distant. There is a caring in it, and there's awareness in it and clarity in it. So when we practice mindfulness meditation actually trains us in this direction, because mindfulness teaches us to turn towards our experience, not to ignore our experience, but to turn towards it without getting lost in it, to learn how to be with what's happening and still stay in the present moment with it. So that really develops into this capacity for equanimity. It's kind of just like a maturing of mindfulness. So this kind of spaciousness and this kind of ability to stay grounded, this is really empowering when we know we can stay with ourselves and stay with the experience and be in relationship with the circumstances, like do what we need to do. We can see that there are choices, and we have less reactivity clouding the mind. This kind of reactivity, we've noticed it, so we're not actually contributing more to it, and it's not growing and growing. It's kind of quieting down and giving us a little more space and clarity. So that can enable us to maybe do something new or have something new happen in response, rather than just go into a habitual reaction. So I realize, like, sometimes the way that we talk about equanimity or hear about it, it makes it sound kind of flat or detached from what's going on. And that's not really it. Mindfulness, like I was saying, really does actually bring us closer to our experience, but it gives us a way to see it more clearly. So it's like a closeness without being lost in it or stuck in it. And that's the spaciousness of having perspective, right? What it's like when we have a wider perspective on a situation. There's this image, that comes from the etymology of the word upekkha. Like I said, upekkha is Pali for equanimity. And it comes from a root word that means to see from above. Like, think about having a bird's eye view, like being an eagle soaring above the situation and looking down and being able to see it in that context, that fuller view. That's upekkha. That's equanimity. So it's this middle way, right? The middle way where we're not entangled in the reactivity surrounding the situation, but we're also not holding the truth of it and the reality of it at arm's length. We're not avoiding it. So we're right there with it, but not so entangled. I also think of equanimity as being related to courage and confidence. Like I said, it was an empowering kind of steadiness. So it can be related to this sense of courage and having confidence. Because when we know we have this like baseline of steadiness, we know how to access that. It gives us a strong footing for meeting our challenges and for being around uncertainty and the unexpected, which are part of life. We know. We've experienced a lot of it in a quick succession in the last several years for most of us. So we know this to be true. But when we have this baseline of steadiness, this sense of equanimity, we know we can rise to the occasion and we can fall back on and rely on our steadiness and clarity because we trust that. There's confidence, too, in knowing that we can recover from strong emotions, that we don't have to avoid them because we know we can handle whatever happens. When we have these tools we know that work for us, these practices that can help us to soothe and repair, we don't have to be so afraid of taking a risk. So we can be more confident. There's kind of an example of this, a story that I love, that is along the lines of this confidence, courage flavor of equanimity. And this is from Thich Nhat Hanh, who's the beautiful Zen Buddhist teacher and activist that passed away last week. So I think this was just kind of on my mind because I was thinking so much about Thich Nhat Hanh after he passed away. But the story is when he told about Vietnamese refugees that were fleeing in boats after the end of the war. And you may have heard this story told by lots of Dharma teachers like Jack Kornfield. It's in one of his books. It's a really famous story. But so as it goes, they were, fleeing their homeland, which was, dangerous itself because of the situation politically and the war. And even in the process of trying to escape that, it was very dangerous. They encountered storms and potential starvation in the boats, and also pirates. And Thich Nhat Hanh explained in these situations, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person on the boat stayed calm and steady, it was enough. They showed the way for everyone to survive. So equanimity can empower that courage, and that can benefit many other people, not just ourselves. You think about that and be inspired about the ripple effect of our equanimity. And then right about now, you might be thinking how lofty that sounds. Like, that's such a heroic story and example. How could we ever live up to that when it's a big enough challenge to just try to maintain some equanimity in the grocery store, right? It is. So I would suggest first to just think of starting really small and building the equanimity muscle every day with like super small moments, but lots of them. So look for those really little instances where you're frustrated or there's wanting or there's fear, and try not to skip over them. Like, I'm talking like the frustration of dropping a dirty spoon on the floor and making a mess when you're in a hurry. Like, low stakes, but really annoying, right? Or being annoyed that your neighbor's music is a little too loud. Like, ordinary things, this kind of stuff. So when that happens, it's an opportunity to notice with your mindfulness, like you can detect some reactivity arising, right? Where do you feel it in the body? Where's this coming up? Where's there the evidence that makes you know that there's some reactive emotion present? And then noticing, is this creating some pressure internally to say something or do something, or to let your mind take off into a big, huge thought storm? And in the space of noticing all that, then you can insert a really accessible little micro practice, like feeling your feet on the floor, or saying one of the equanimity phrases to yourself, or taking a slower breath. Really simple stuff, right? Or like look out a window and see the tree or the sky just for a second. And then you can go back and do what's next, do what's needed. But you've inserted a little space between the stimulus and the response, right? So the response might well be quite different and less reactive. And you may have noticed with some of these little micro practice suggestions that a lot of them were to do with the body, like the breath or seeing or feeling the feet, right? Because the body is a very important arena for developing equanimity. Practicing mindfulness of the body is really helpful, and having practices to work with the nervous system is really helpful because the nervous system is highly involved in our reactive responses. So it's very hard to be like calm and equanimous when our nervous system is kind of off the rails, right? I mean, maybe off the rails sounds too dramatic, but when we're revved up in a physiological sense, it doesn't really work to just say, okay, calm down and, be equanimous, right? So we have to work with this on all the different levels that we exist. So if we can become aware of the body, we can catch those signs of distress in the body, like the irritation or the pressure, or the anger, discomfort, the embarrassment, the fear, like whatever it might be, and then do something to soothe ourselves before we act out of that emotional state. If you feel the body contract, can you take a long exhale? Can you drop your shoulders? If you feel your energy heightening, like your heart rate is picking up, can you feel down to your feet and get grounded? These are all just examples, what might work for you. If you're in a private enough space, you could like stand up and shake or do a few jumping jacks, or you could hum, you could sing a song, you could vocalize. It's very organic. You can play with all kinds of different responses that soothe yourself and figure out what is your go-to and what works for you, and how you can meet this kind of moment of distress and return to equanimity. So those are all kind of like in the flow of life versions of practicing equanimity. that's kind of the first piece I wanted to talk about. The second is the development of equanimity more intentionally through our more formal practice, like in our meditation. When you practice mindfulness meditation, just like regular mindfulness meditation, following the breath, doing body scans, things like that, that naturally develops equanimity, but there is also a specific practice of equanimity, like practicing equanimity phrases, silently repeating phrases, much like we would do with the compassion practice or loving kindness practice. So I'll share what my current phrases of equanimity are, and you can use these if you like, or you can certainly kind of riff on them or make your own versions. But my phrases currently: may I feel steady and grounded. May my mind be clear and spacious, free from reactivity. May I care and let go. May I know what to do. So 4 phrases. May I feel steady and grounded. May my mind be clear and spacious, free from reactivity. May I care and let go. May I know what to do. So hopefully these make sense as elements of equanimity after hearing me describe it throughout this talk. May I know what to do is, it's not passive. I may have to act. But may I also know what's mine to do, right? And what's appropriate to do and when. May I care and let go. So not numb, not detached, but spacious, able to let go as needed. And then the first 2 phrases, steady and grounded, clear and spacious. These are kind of the energetic qualities of equanimity, the embodied qualities of equanimity that we can call in through repetition of these kinds of phrases. So these are my personal phrases. They're my current favorites. There are lots of different ways you could practice with phrases. Other people use different phrases. And you can totally make up your own. Maybe you can use these as kind of a template, a jumping off point. And the meditation that I'll send out in my email in February will walk you through using these phrases, so you can kind of have a sense of how that goes and how to repeat them and how that works and how to time it and things like that. In the meantime, there are also some equanimity meditations and related classes in the Move to Meditate class library. So if you're in there, if you're a member, you can also go check those out. So this is an introduction to the theme of equanimity. I hope it sounds intriguing and relevant for you. I'm really looking forward to practicing together and developing some greater steadiness together this month. Just imagine if everyone we met was doing this kind of practice. Like, wouldn't the world be a more stable and sane place? So I will be sending out the 3-page deeper dive worksheets on equanimity next week around February 3rd. And the idea of that is just the worksheet could help you kind of have fun with it and personalize these concepts and think about what they mean to you specifically. So it all becomes more like meaningful and useful. And so just make sure you're signed up for the newsletter if you would like to receive these resources this month. The next one will be coming out around February 3rd with the worksheets. So the link is in the show notes and the description. And there's a sign up form also on my website, like any of the boxes you can fill in to sign up for my email. That'll work at movedtomeditate.yoga. So of course, also if you're listening to this much later and you've missed that newsletter, but you still want the worksheet, you can just email me. And I will be very happy to add you for future months' worksheets and send you this equanimity one in the meantime. So that is our episode for today. And I am grateful to you for listening. Thank you so much. Thank you for your practice and for bringing your equanimity into the world. It is needed, so keep going. So that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend and/or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and help others find us that way. To learn more about my work, the Moved to Meditate class library, live online classes, teacher trainings, and private lessons, go to movedtomeditate.yoga. Thanks so much for listening.